Hello, my name is Chiara Gnoli and I have been working in counter-trafficking in the UK for about 3 years. Before that I was working in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a country in the former Yugoslav Republic, where the issue of human trafficking is still very important. Today I'm just going to tell you a little bit about human trafficking in the UK. In the UK, I worked for an international organization on migration, dealing with all sorts of migration issues, including assisting victims of trafficking. And I was responsible for a direct assistance program that helped victims rehabilitate into society. I was also responsible for a training program to social workers, police officers, and government officials, identifying victims of trafficking so that they had more tools to do so effectively. I was also working on preventing trafficking by raising awareness amongst the UK public and in schools. While I was living in Bosnia, I worked for an organization that funded safe shelters for Bosnian women that had been trafficked and sexually exploited abroad. So a little bit about the UK. The UK is mainly a country of destination for victims of trafficking, and during my 3 years working in London, there was an increase in the number of male victims of trafficking being exploited in forced labour, forced begging, and even criminal activity. In recent years, many men in forced labour have been found working in agriculture, packaging, and also on chicken farms. Of course, there's still very high levels of women and young girls that are trafficked into sexual exploitation. In the UK, street prostitution is legal and it is heavily regulated by the police. It is therefore virtually impossible to see prostitution on the streets. This means in a way that it is actually harder to find and rescue the women. The police usually receive tips or intelligence from clients or members of the public on brothels, and they are then able to conduct raids and rescue the women. Brothels in the UK are also illegal, so they may raid brothels on the fact that they are not legal entities and then potentially find women who are trafficked. Once these women, children and men are rescued, they are referred into what is called the UK's National Referral Mechanism. This gives the victims 45 days of support with safe shelter, medical care, legal advice and any other need they may have. Unfortunately, after these 45 days, it is still very hard to understand what happens to victims. This is probably the main issue with the current system and the way the UK government responds to victims of trafficking. While they provide them with 45 days of immediate protection and support, after this period is over, it's very difficult for them to remain in the UK if they do not have the appropriate immigration status. It is very hard to receive the appropriate immigration status because of the UK's long history of immigration, which means that there are now tighter controls on who is allowed to stay in the country and who is not. This means that the only way a victim of trafficking can stay in the UK legally is if they either are providing evidence to police in support of a court case against their trafficker, which unfortunately doesn't usually happen, or they must claim asylum, which is a very difficult and long process in the UK. Also, if at the end of the asylum claim they are not granted asylum, they may be deported, which is very traumatizing for many people, especially if they are former victims of trafficking. This, of course, only applies to people who are from outside of the European Union. If a person is from the European Union, they have legal rights to reside in the UK. However, if you are a victim of trafficking from the European Union, once the 45 days are over, you receive no more support through the government. The only way that you can receive support is if an NGO helps you. Over the 3 years I worked in London, there was a significant increase in the number of victims of trafficking coming from Eastern Europe, particularly Romania, Hungary, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. Many of these individuals had been recruited through job advertisements, and quite a significant amount were trafficked by their own families. There was an important court case and police operation 2 years ago which focused on a family of Romanians of Roma origin that had trafficked many of their children, sons, daughters, nephews, niece, and so on, they were a very big family, into the UK to work in forced labour. It seemed that with the Roma community, this was a common form of recruitment into trafficking through neighbours or family members. There are still high levels of trafficking into sexual exploitation from Nigeria, Vietnam, China, and India. There were many high-profile cases of Indian women being trafficked for domestic servitude and Vietnamese boys being trafficked for cannabis cultivation. Previously, many police officers would overlook the victim of trafficking and focus on the immigration offence. Luckily, through awareness raising and training, the police and government officials understand that trafficking is not an immigration offense, but a crime against an individual. They're very focused on rescuing and supporting victims and trying to arrest the people responsible for the crime. I recently moved to Buenos Aires, and I'm really interested in understanding more about the trafficking situation in the country, and alongside Basta de Trata, find ways to prevent it, fight it, and rescue individuals. I hope this brief overview was interesting, and if you have any questions, I will be able to respond to them through Basta de Trata. So thank you very much.